Hey, peace and blessings, everybody. It's your brother, Sorry. We're back with yet another one. Um, as always, peace to the ancestors. You know what I mean? They're always the shoulders that we stand on. I'm kind of laughing because I know y'all probably see the title of the video, so y'all probably already know. Y'all probably see the title of the video, the star Shabbatai. Yeah, we gonna get into it today. But again, not trying to take no shine from the ancestors. Peace to the ancestors. Appreciate their contributions, and they are the shoulders that we standing on. Without a whole lineage of individuals and a whole body after body of teachings, from individuals who laid it down long before I did. You see what I'm saying? My teachers that I came in contact with in the flesh, you see what I'm saying, that influenced my path. My brothers, constantly inspired by my brothers, inspired by my sisters as well. From my older brothers to my younger brothers laying it down, my peers, always inspired by them. You know what I'm saying? Much love and respect to everybody, no matter where you're from, where you're at, what organization you're representing, however, you know what I'm saying? If we are trying to do the same thing as one collective, you know what I'm saying? I'm with it. I know sometimes some of this subject matter that we get into, especially this one right here, it may be kind of touchy or whatever, but just want to let it be known it's never my intentions to offend anyone. I'm just laying this down for the benefit, mainly for the benefit of my young guys, you know what I'm saying? Because there's been a concerted effort to warp y'all into some some sort of monstrosities of some sort of social engineering experiment. And to all the people who came before me, there have been gargantuan efforts to stop that from happening. You see what I'm saying? So in keeping with that tradition, you see what I'm saying, we're going to present to you this presentation, the star Shabbatai. You see what I'm saying, going into some of this information. And before we get into any of that, man, peace to the true and living. If you've been watching this, following any of this material, man, from the more simplistic to the more complex, man, because I know we've been kind of getting into it, you must be the true and living. Peace and blessings to you. So let's kind of get into this. Okay, so this one is going to be called the Star of Shabbatai. Okay, Shabbatai is the planet Saturn, because when we talk about planets, let's say like in astrology or whatever, it's going to be the, the star sacred to Mercury, the star sacred to Mars, or whatever case may be. They're considered wandering stars. You have fixed stars, which is what we would consider stars in the more modern sense, which are actual stars. And then you have wandering stars, what they used to call them. And that's what we would call planetas, or I think in Vedic astrology, the grahas, the grabbers, you see what I'm saying? I might be saying it wrong, but something of that nature. So they have different names or different nomenclature and different systems and cultures and stuff like that. But the star of Shabbatai, so we're going to talk about the connection between Judaism and really not just Judaism. We're going to talk about, it's going to be a little bit of a series. We're going to go into the connection that Saturn has in the three monotheistic religions, right? So we're going to start off with Judaism, the star of Shabbatai. You see what I'm saying? And we also going to get into some more material in regards to Judaism and stuff like that. Some of the less biblical material, the more kind of nuanced material. We're going to get into some of that in future videos. But this one, we're going to go into the connection that the planet Saturn has with the Judaic faith and everything like that. So on a previous video on the Sabean series or what have you, we talked about the Saturnian golden age and everything like that, how Cronus was said to rule the golden age. The golden age was ruled by the Nagas. The golden age is associated with Satya Yuga in the Vedic cosmology, associated with the Sabean phase in the Egyptian cosmology, associated with the the golden age, as far as when Kronos ruled, as far as the Greek cosmology and everything like that. We talked about how Saturn, another name for Saturn is Sut, or Saturn corresponds with El or Kronos or Satuk or Sut. You see what I'm saying? We talked about how Sut, when we get back into the mythos of the great mother and child, how Sut in his original iteration, not the iteration that's associated with evil, but as far as him being the brother of Osiris and everything and murdering him and all that stuff like that, we're talking about Satuk in his original iteration, where he is the son to his mother and he's associated with the star Sirius. Okay, so when we get into Satuk in his original iteration and everything like that, he's more associated with this mother cult, more associated with this Ophidian current and everything like that. We made the correspondence between the original iteration of Satuk and Uranus, as far as Greek mythology, as far as Anu, as far as Sumerian mythology, and we made the correlation as far as Ophion, as far as the Pelagian so-called mythology and everything like that, Ophion and Arunimi. Okay, we made the correlation that way back in the day in the ancient world, according to Greco-Roman historians such as Pliny the Elder and Strabo. You know, we got to have some receipts on this because people don't like stuff like that. Pliny the Elder, Strabo, and everything like that. We're dealing with Ethiopia as a large empire. We're not dealing with, and this is pre-Aksum, because people gonna say, "Oh man, you talking about Aksum?" I'm not talking about Aksum. I'm talking about pre-Aksum. You have a collection of civilizations or whatever that all worship the great mother and child or whatever. This is a recorded, documented thing in history. Ain't nothing Brother Saul wanted to be. Okay, so you have this whole slew of civilizations, Babylonians, Egyptians, Nubians, all these slew of civilizations, and all of them have a mother and child cult and everything like that in common, or whatever case may be. And this is the same era of time that we're talking about. Okay, just like how we talked about on previous videos. Okay, you have this golden age. It's equivalent to what Judeo-Christianity would call pre-flood time, or let's say like the Garden of Eden. But like we're gonna talk about this pretty frankly. You see what I'm saying? I'm not gonna pull no punches. The Bible is the cliff notes for older civilizations information, or whatever case may be. So you cannot try to fit everything in biblical framework. As we've explored the bioetheric engineering of several spiritual systems such as Ifa and Palo Mayombe, when we explore the bioetheric engineering of a particular spiritual system and everything like that, the engineering of Christianity is engineered to be simple. It's supposed to be simple. It's a right-hand path system, or whatever case may be. It's meant to be simple. You have less to think about. You have one deity to think about. It's not, the stories are not meant to be super duper elaborate or whatever, because it's designed to be simplistic, so you don't have all that to think about. So it's engineered a particular type of way. Whereas a person who may deal with Ifa, their system is a little bit more complicated. You see what I'm saying? Doesn't mean that this system or that system is better or worse. They're just engineered differently. It's to reflect the needs of the people or the needs of the community at large. Okay. So when we get back into this pre-flood era or whatever case may be, like I said before, we enter in a period of time or whatever. We did a whole video about in regards to David Talbott, some of his stuff, the Saturn myth, and where he talks about how the planet may have had a different configuration and everything like that, similar to what they call the celestial wheel configuration or whatever, that's shown in multiple different cultures and everything like that. Something happened to the planet and everything to disrupt this. We've zeroed in on that as far as that being equated with, let's say, like the younger dryas. So it's a period of time that we know that things could grow larger on the planet for millions and millions of years. This was the normal state of the planet. You see what I'm saying? And then something happened to the planet, or whatever case may be. And then the planet changed into this lower voltage, lower frequency state, or whatever case may be. You see what I'm saying? Certain stories and certain traditions say that the moon was not always there. The moon came there. The moon does not turn all the way around. The moon is like 1/4 the size of the planet. That's unheard of. There's a lot of different things about the moon that would suggest that potentially the moon is artificial. But the moon stabilizes the tides and everything like that. Without the moon, there must have been some sort of other mechanism or whatever case may be. Go back into the video where we talk about the golden age, the Saturnalian golden age, and all that stuff like that. We kind of get into all that. Saturn was said to rule the golden age, right? Okay, so before we get any further, just kind of had to lay that down real quick or whatever. So when we get into, let's say, like, I don't know, modern Judaism and everything like that, it's viewed from a monotheistic perspective, right? When you start exploring the history and the development of Judaism and stuff like that, you're going to run into something called Yahwehism. Yahwehism is the polytheistic iteration of Judaism before it became monotheistic and everything like that, right? So where it's going to be, Yahweh is going to be closer to El. Yahweh is going to be paired with Asheroth. Yahweh is going to be a part of a pantheon and everything like that in its original iteration. How we know that this ain't something that Asar is just making up because they found a temple to Yahweh on Elephantine Island in Egypt or whatever, showing that there is a, it just shows the, how that faith was not always monotheistic. You see what I'm saying? They had a priestess, they had offerings and a temple and stuff like that. As far as Yahweh is concerned, the tradition was a little bit different than how we know modern Judaism to be. Okay, so now before we get into this, we still priming the pump because, like I said, we got a little, you know what I'm saying? We got a little ways to go, as the old people would say. Okay, so I'm going, you know, we just prepared a little something right here. Okay, so I just prepared this, and I hope y'all can see it. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so in an effort to alleviate some of the more juvenile conversation, we're going to go ahead and lay this out so we don't have to talk about it later, and so that we don't have to go into certain other areas that may potentially be interpreted as a level of disrespect to a certain community of people. We're not trying to disrespect nobody or nothing like that. We just kind of like laying this down how it go. This is how I was taught some of this information. I was taught that if you want to trace a people, you have to trace them. An easy way to trace them is by the language that they speak, because you can knock off noses of statues, you can make up all kind of funny narratives, you can tell all kind of lies as far as history is concerned, but you can't fake a whole language that's been documented for thousands of years. So let's kind of get into that. Okay, so I hope y'all can see this. Okay, so we're gonna get into the Afro-Asiatic language family. This is the family of languages that Hebrew comes from, right? So we getting into the Afro-Asiatic language family. Okay, AKA the Hamato-Semitic language family, AKA the Semitic language family. So this is a language family spoken in Africa, exclusively in Africa, that is derived from people of African descent. This is derived from black people. You see what I'm saying? This is a language that black people speak, or a family of languages that black people speak. There are over 600 languages in this family, right? So what we gonna do? Okay, so when we deal with this, there are 6 main branches of this family. You see what I'm saying? So it's 6 main branches of the Afro-Asiatic language family, right? So the first branch is the Berber language family, right? That's spoken in North Africa, because this is an African language family that black people or that African people speak. You see what I'm saying? So there's the Chadic branch that's spoken in Niger and Chad, right? There's the Cushitic branch that's spoken in the Horn of Africa, because this is an African language like we're talking about, right? Okay, there's the ancient Egyptian branch. The Egyptian branch that was spoken in ancient Egypt. It's said to be extinct, but I know a lot of our modern scholars equate it to the language Wolof, as far as the Medu Neter and all that stuff like that. That's maybe a whole nother conversation. A lot of my people who speak Medu Neter fluently or whatever case may be, they may, you know, have something constructive to add to that conversation. That's not the scope of where we going today, so we're just gonna bypass that. Omotic, that's in southwest Ethiopia. So all of the 5 branches of this language family that we just talked about, they're all African. They're all spoken in various places in Africa. So this ain't no different. Semitic languages. Ethiopian speaks a Semitic language. Eritreans speak a Semitic language. They are Semitic people. You see what I'm saying? So that's another thing. Okay, so Semitic languages are spoken in Arabia. What did Brother Asar tell you that Arabia was called back in the day? Arabia in the time of Strabo and Pliny the Elder, when we're talking about Eastern Ethiopia being India, Western Ethiopia being Africa, and Ethiopia proper being Arabia. The dividing line being the Red Sea. Arabia being divided historically into Arabia Petrae, which is what they call the Middle East today. Is the area that they call the Middle East today. There's no such thing as the Middle East. That terminology came out about the 1900 AD. So nobody called it the Middle East prior to 1900. Okay, so Arabia Petrae, Arabia Felix, and Arabia Deserta. You see what I'm saying? So that's Arabia. So Semitic just means Arabia. Ain't that what Dana Marniche said? That the Bible and the Quran are talking about the sons of Noah are Arabs. So they're talking, and the language is going to reflect that. The sons of Noah are Arabs. You see, Arab, the person Arab, he's related to Noah. You see what I'm saying? He's a descendant of Noah. That's a person, Arab, like the Arabic comes from. So we're gonna get into this. So Hebrew and Arabic come out of this Semitic portion of this language family, or whatever case may be. They're spoken in Arabia, modern day Arabia, in the so-called Middle East. And what Brother Asar told you, that used to be Ethiopia. So we're gonna keep going with this. Okay. So even further down, I know y'all probably can't see this. I'm trying to get it on screen. Just for the record, you dig? Okay, so let's go into some of these languages. So before we even get into this star Shabbatai thing, we gotta destroy all the more juvenile conversations before we even get into this. So this will give us context, so we don't even gotta have no juvenile conversation. Because me personally, respectfully, I'm not a Hebrew. I don't follow Hebrew ideology, respectfully, but at the same time, those are just another iteration of Ethiopians. You see what I'm saying? That's just another iteration of Ethiopians. Thus, what we're talking about with the language right here. So as we can see, these are all languages that come out of Africa. So let's see how they divide up. So we have Proto-Semitic, right? We got Proto-Semitic. Okay, so that's the language. The proto-language is the language that all the languages come from. It's the hypothetical language, mother tongue, that all these Semitic languages may come from. So let's go. Proto-Semitic, it divides into Eastern and Western Semitic, right? So let's do the Eastern one first, because the Eastern one is a little bit easier or shorter. Okay, so Eastern Semitic, remember how we told you that you have Arabia, and everything, Arabia stretches from Egypt until you get to the borders of Iraq. That was considered that whole little corridor right there, or whatever case may be. So this is the borders of Iraq, Sumer and Akkad. This is what we're talking about. So you have the Eastern Semitic, Ablite, and Akkadian. Akkadian gives you the Babylonian and Assyrian, right? So Akkadian, if you remember the movie, The Scorpion King, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson was playing an Akkadian, as the Scorpion King and stuff in the movie. So you have Sumer and Akkad. If I'm not mistaken, Akkad is in the north, Sumer is in the south, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just doing this off the top of the dome right there on that. Sumerian is a language isolate, whereas Akkadian is a part of this language family right here. We don't know where Sumerian comes from. We can have all kind of theories about the Anunnaki and all that stuff like that, but I can't give you no receipts on those theories. So I'm going with stuff that I got receipts for. So, okay, so you got Akkadian, Sumer, and Akkad. Okay, so that's Iraq and all that. These are still even Sumer and Akkad. So the Akkadians spoke a language related to black people in Africa. Okay, just food for thought. Just like when we read in Celestial Ship of the North. Okay, so now we're gonna go into the Western Semitic variant of that. Okay, so let's see here. You got modern South Arabian, you got Ethiopian, and you got Central Semitic, right? So those are the three groups that come out of the Western, right? So out of Central Semite, you have Arabic, right? Then we say Arabic is related to this. So basically, when Brother Asar was telling you that the original Arabs, the original Arabs are how can I really say it? Are darker skinned, however it may go. When Dana Marniche tells you that, or whatever case may be, how the original Arabs were black and they had red slaves or white slaves or whatever case may be. That's why she's talking like that. That's why I'm talking like that. When we talk about how there's an Ethiopian empire, when Arabia is Ethiopia proper, that's why we talking like that, because these are the languages that they speak, and that's what, and we're gonna keep going through this. Okay, so Central Semite, Arabic, Old Arabian, let's see here, Arabic, Old Arabian, and Northwest Semite. Okay, so remember we told you Phoenicians and all them are they come out of the Erythraean Sea. That's the southern tip of Arabia. That's the area of Saba and everything like that. All of these languages, they coming out. They're related to languages in Arabia, like what we've been talking about. Okay, so Northwest Semitic, right? You got Canaanite, you got Aramic, you got Ugaritic, you got Somalian, you got Deir Allah. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so those are all the ones that come out of the Northwest Semite. All of these are coming out of Arabia. You see what I'm saying? Canaanite. Okay, out of Canaanite you get Hebrew, Phoenician, and Moabite. So Phoenician, like hooked on phonics, like the Carthaginians. If I'm not mistaken, the Carthaginians migrated to Carthage from Tyre. So we know that the people who were in that area or whatever, Tyre's in Lebanon, the people in that area were of the same type of people and everything like that. So this is where Hebrew comes from. So this whole thing, or whatever case may be, all of these are languages of people that originally reside in Africa, right? So, you know, ain't no such thing as the Middle East. You see what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? There was a massive slave trade that existed in the Black Sea region, you see what I'm saying, for thousands of years. So 9 times out of 10, if there are people that look different than what we described on this thing or whatever case may be, just like I'm speaking English, but I'm not, but I don't look like what you would consider the traditional phenotype of an Englishman or whatever case may be. That's probably what happened or whatever case may be. So that's to alleviate a lot of our more juvenile conversations or whatever case may be, and not even to get disrespectful about it toward nobody or whatever. We just went through the language and we let you know where Hebrew comes from. You see what I'm saying? And the people who originated that language, what they spoke, even when we talk about ancient Egyptian comes from the same language family. So anybody who telling me that the ancient Egyptians is something other than what we just talked about, we just get rid of we just end these juvenile conversations. You see what I'm saying? So, all right. So, yeah. Okay. So let's get into this. And I know that was a hell of an intro, you know what I'm saying? I know we kind of went on and on about that. Like I said, on this one, we're not really trying to pull no punches, not trying to be disrespectful toward nobody, but I'm not really gonna pull no punches as far as stuff like that, because my young guys gotta know that. You see what I'm saying? If I pull these punches, then the people who come after me gonna have these same questions and the same stuff gonna be up. So we gotta go ahead and get this over with. So okay, so let's move forward. Okay, so let's get into this, right? Okay, Saturn in the shadow of the primordial age, right? Okay, a syncretic analysis of Hebrew origins, esoteric cosmology, and the golden epoch collapse. Okay, so we talked about the golden age. We talked about the language that reflects Hebrews and where they come from. Okay, so let's see here. The historical and mythological connections between ancient Jews, Judaism, and the planet Saturn is rooted in a profound paradox, right? Saturn, known in Hebrew as Shabbatai, right? Saturn, known in Hebrew as Shabbatai, is frequently associated in the Hellenistic and medieval astrological traditions as the Greater Malefic, right? You have the Greater Malefic, which is Saturn, and then you have the Lesser Malefic, which is Mars, governing restriction, melancholy, and judgment, right? Saturn sets the boundaries. Yet this same celestial body lends its name to the sanctity of the Hebrew Sabbath. So that's where the word Sabbath or Shabbat comes from. Shabatai, the planet Saturn. Shabbat, the seventh day of rest. This intrinsic link forms the foundation for exploring a sophisticated, often contradictory, symbolic relationship that stretches from biblical Genesis narratives through medieval Kabbalah and into modern revisionist cosmology, right? Okay, so let's keep going. This expert level perspective employs a synchronistic methodology bridging established academic sources such as the analysis of Jewish thinkers like Abraham Ibn Ezra and the archetypal findings of at Elephantine. That's what we were talking about a little bit earlier, the Hebrew temple. Or the temple to Yahweh at Elephantine Island. You can look this up. You got the internet at your fingertips. With heterodox mythological theories, including those proposed by David Talbott. We was talking about David Talbott and the Saturn myth. The whole thing about how Saturn was closer to the planet. It was a brown dwarf star that basically increased the voltage of the planet, that allowed megafauna and everything to grow like that. Okay, Gerald Massey talks about the Sabean phase, like we've been talking about video after video, and the ethnohistorical critiques put forth by Dana Marniche. We're dipping into some of Dana Marniche's research and stuff because she has some well put together stuff as far as Hebrews and the tribes and everything like that. The objective is to produce a comprehensive understanding of how Saturn as a celestial archetype functions not merely as an astrological marker, but as the encoded memory of a primordial cosmological epoch that shaped Hebrew identity, religion, and symbolic practices. Let's go. Okay, the part one. All right. So I think, we kind of get where we going with this. The six-pointed star, all that is emblematic of Saturn. You see what I'm saying? Even when we start talking about Islam, we're gonna start talking about the black cube. That ties into Saturn as well. So all of the three monotheistic religions have this in it. You see what I'm saying? Christianity must have this in it as well because Christianity is based on Judaism or whatever. This is not to convert anybody to or away from anything like this. This is for the mature mind. This is a kind of like a deep dive into this. You see what I'm saying? This is not to disrespect anybody's what anybody subscribes to. Like I always say, whatever stop you from going out there doing disrupting society and everything like that, have at it. You see what I'm saying? It's not meant to be disrespectful toward anybody. The correlation between Saturn, Shabbatai, and the Sabbath, Shabbat, was a key focus of medieval Jewish thinkers grappling with Hellenistic and Arab astrological systems, right? The 12th century sage Abraham Ibn Ezra is in his because we must remember that you have the Renaissance. You see what I'm saying? After they got the Moors out of Europe, you have the Renaissance and stuff like that. You have the Moors in Europe, this is the Islamic Golden Age. So all the people that without the Islamic Golden Age in Al-Andalus and that whole era right there or whatever, there would be no Renaissance. There would be no Leonardo da Vinci. All the universities are built during this time and everything like that. So when we talk about Abraham Ibn Ezra, he's one of the individuals that was around during that time. It's several individuals that are around during that time. Polymaths, mathematicians, all kind of people of that nature, just kind of like painting that out there. Let's see, in his commentary on the fourth commandment, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, explicitly connected Saturn with the seventh day. Ibn Ezra recognized Saturn's traditional astrological character as baneful and restrictive. His contribution was to identify a mechanism for transmuting this external, potentially negative planetary influence into a salvific religious command, kind of like a salve, kind of heal the wound type thing, by ordaining that the Jews should cease from everyday labor and devote themselves solely to the fear of God on the Sabbath. The observation itself becomes an act of ritual limitation. Ritual limitation. That's an interesting way of putting it, because that would be the function of the Sabbath day. It's a day of rest. Saturn would basically have it. It's very Saturnalian in its nature. This embrace of restriction internalizes Saturn's primary quality. Limitation, stasis, secession, and sanctifies it, effectively overriding the planet's power over human fate. The Jew, by dedication one day to non-material spiritual matters, performs a religious practice that acts as a I'm butchering words. Apatropic shield against deterministic forces. This sophisticated approach represents a mastery of cosmological reality through religious mandate, a profound example of how Jewish tradition appropriated and purified external astrological knowledge, right? Okay, so Kabbalah, Saturn, and the messianic impulse, right? The association between Jews and Saturn continues to develop strongly within Jewish community tradition, particularly in the Kabbalah from the High Middle Ages through the 20th century. This connection culminated in the highly influential Messianic movement centered on Shabbatai Zevi, born in 1626. Zevi's first name, Shabbatai, directly means Saturn in Hebrew. Let me see here. Okay, so the occult geometry, the hexagram, Saturn and the cult of El. Okay, so let's get into this. The geometric representation, most often associated with Judaism, the Star of David or the Mogan David, is also inextricably linked to the Saturnalian tradition in esoteric circles, known historically as the Seal of Solomon. The hexagram is claimed to have been utilized by King Solomon for magic and involved the worship of Saturn. Esoteric studies categorize the hexagram as originating in ancient Egypt and Babylonian paganism, symbolizing duality, the union of upward male and downward female principles. And when it says that it was utilized in Egyptian and Babylonian paganism, we can see by the language that these are all the same group of people. You see what I'm saying? So they would have probably had a common metaphysics or something similar. They would have had something similar across cultures because they were basically the same people. So crucially, adherents of Saturnalian cosmology point to modern astrological data, which reveals that Saturn is the only large planet in the solar system to possess a naturally occurring hexagonal shape visible at its north pole. The black cube on Saturn and everything like that. If you look at it a certain way, it looks like a 6-pointed star. If you look at it another way, it's a hexagram. Okay, so this fact is presented as evidence that the Star of David is literally the geometric signature of the planet Saturn. So they're saying that's where they get that from. That's what they're saying. This connection leads to interpretations wherein the hexagram symbolizes Saturn, Kronos, as a primordial Canaanite high god, El. So that's what we were talking about again. Saturn ties into El, and even when Yahweh gets a lot more of his universal attributes once the Israelites are in bondage in Babylon and everything like that, he takes on the attributes of El. You see what I'm saying? A foundational component of the term Israel itself is Israel, who is explicitly linked to Saturn in certain esoteric readings. The association deepens when considering the alleged links between the Seal of Solomon, Saturn, and the worship of Moloch. Moloch is often identified with Saturn, Kronos. Moloch is identified with, Phoenicians and all that stuff like that, Canaanites, what have you, whose ancient rites sometimes require child sacrifice. The adoption of the hexagram in Jewish communities, particularly the 7th century Prague, may thus be understood as a late-stage reabsorption and symbolic cleansing of the primordial Saturnian archetype, El, Cronus, linking modern Jewish identity back to the banished, powerful universal monarch. Because back in the day, that was the universal monarch. And like how we said, the Torah even have stories about God departing. You see what I'm saying? And the man in the moon, or the angel of the moon, and stuff like that, similar to the story of Enoch and everything like that, potentially where the story of Enoch might actually come from. The Elephantine anomaly and the goddess cult. Recent archaeological findings reinforce the existence of syncretic religious practices in early Jewish history, challenging the traditional narrative of monolithic Yahwistic monotheism. The discovery of an Israelite temple at Elephantine Island in Egypt, operating from the 6th or 5th century BC, demonstrated a full functioning temple service with animal sacrifices, which typically was restricted to the Jerusalem temple. Furthermore, excavations revealed non-textual data, including mold-made figurines of naked women, suggesting the practice of goddess worship alongside Yahweh. Yeah, because when you get into Ugarit and a lot of the sources that they find in ancient Ugarit and stuff like that, El is paired with Asheroth and stuff like that. It fleshes out a lot more of the story that we get in the Bible and stuff like that. Because again, I'm telling y'all that the Bible is Cliff Notes. The engineering of that whole system is designed to be simplistic. So it's not, you see what I'm saying? It's for better or for worse. And as we can see when we talk about Ugarit, I don't know if y'all can see this with my lighting. Ugarit. Where we at? Ugarit right there. Hebrew is right there. You see what I'm saying? So as we can see, they're related. They're in the same language family, spoken by the same people. So, all right, back to the business at hand. Let's see. Let's see here. Furthermore, excavations revealed non-textual data, including mold-made figurines of naked women, suggesting the practice of goddess worship alongside Yahweh. Goddess worship alongside Yahweh. Because remember, when we talk about certain phases of time, the monotheistic phase and stuff like that, it came in at a certain period of time, or whatever case may be. Prior to this, in the oldest phase is dealing with the great mother and child and this whole Ophidian thing. Okay, so it's no coincidence that there's a holdover and there's a remnant of goddess worship in this, because at some point the matriarchal system was replaced by the patriarchal system, and we're going to get into that. This goddess is often identified with Astarte, right? Sound like Ishtar, sound like Esther, don't it? The Hellenized Northwest Semitic equivalent of Ishtar, right? Let that sink in. This finding provokes tangible evidence of an early diaspora Judean community integrating foreign elements, specifically goddess cults, along with the Great Mother tradition, like what we've been talking about. So they talking about they integrated that from foreign cults. I would think that was a part of the original thing, because remember when we talked about in Celestial Ship of the North that at one time Yahweh was depicted as a female in certain accounts. You see what I'm saying? Because the mother cult comes first. You see what I'm saying? And then the patriarchal system takes hold, and you have male deities. So, which serves as an important archaeological anchor for the later mythological theories concerning the matriarchal golden age and the overthrow of the motherhood. We're going to talk about that. So, let me see here. Part 2, the cosmic genesis, Saturn as universal monarch and the great mother. Okay, so David Talbott's The Saturn Myth and the Primordial Sun. The connection between Saturn and Jewish identity extends far beyond medieval astrology into revisionist cosmology, most prominently articulated by David Talbott in The Saturn Myth. Now, this is AI calling it revisionists and all that stuff like that. So Talbott rejects the conventional view that the supreme deity of antiquity was the solar orb. All right, and like we talked about on previous videos or what have you, David Talbott, he explains that it's it's an unexplained thing that in certain periods of time, in certain texts, in a very, very far gone era, they reference solar deities. They reference the planet Saturn by the name of solar deities. Shamish, Helios, you see what I'm saying? All these deities are, they're solar deities in our era of time, but at some point, according to David Talbott, they were these solar names were applied to Saturn, and Saturn was considered, from his perspective, as the second sun, because it was closer. It was more like a brown dwarf star, and it was closer to the planet Earth or whatever. And its effect on the planet was that of increasing the voltage and allowing things to grow larger on the planet. So, okay. Talbott rejects the conventional view that the supreme deity of antiquity was the solar orb. Instead, he proposes that the great god of universal monarch of the ancients was Saturn, which is a far distant epoch, hung ominously close to the earth and visibly dominated the northern sky, right? So he was saying basically Saturn was stationary, and you would have that celestial wheel configuration or what have you, all the planets kind of rotating like this, and Saturn is kind of hovering over or what have you. Okay, Talbott's theory, often associated with the electric universe model, posits that the Earth, Mars, and Venus were once aligned in a polar configuration centered around Saturn, whose functioned as a primordial sun or sub-brown dwarf star. This god one ruled over the Golden Age, whose memory, Talbott argues, is encoded in fundamental symbols across diverse cultures. Symbols such as the cross, the sun wheel, and the crowns of royalty are interpreted as representations derived from the celestial appearance of the close proximity of Saturn. The existence of this epoch, which collapsed in cosmic catastrophe, what we equating with potentially the Younger Dryas, is presented as the very foundation upon which subsequent myth, religion, and civilization was built. So basically, we're basically suggesting, again, we know that the Younger Dryas happened. What David Talbott is presenting is, a theory about Saturn's position and everything like that, corresponding it with the mythology and everything like that. Let me see here. But what we're basically saying is, just as it was a process for Judaism to develop into a monotheistic concept or whatever case may be, even in a far gone era of time, it may have reflected more of the mother cult or whatever, which, if this be the case, this would make what we call Judaism actually older, you see what I'm saying, than previously thought or what have you. Not in its current form, but its existence, period. So, but it would change things about it. It wouldn't be the same system. It would be something a little bit different. However, it would exist nonetheless. The figure of the Hebrew high god El, the original supreme deity in Canaanite pantheons, because remember, we just went over the languages. So we alleviating all the juvenile conversations, or a lot of them. We just went over the language. So we see these people are connected ethnically, linguistically, probably a lot of their customs and things of that nature. Okay, the original supreme deity in Canaanite pantheons is explicitly identified with Saturn in these esoteric cosmologies. If Saturn was indeed the universal monarch ruling the pristine golden age, then the worship of El, remember we talked about Satuk is a primordial god of all time. El ain't nothing but an iteration of Satuk. You see what I'm saying? And by extension, the Yahwistic system that absorbed El's attributes represents a direct continuation of or transformed remembrance of the primordial Saturn cult. So they're basically saying that, let's go back over that. The figure of the Hebrew high god El, because remember, everything has El at the end of it. Israel, Uriel, Raphael, Mikael, Ezekiel. Everybody got El at the end of their name. So that's, it's an undeniable thing. Transformed remembrance of the primordial Saturn cult. Okay, Saturn, El, Kronos, thus embodies the archetype of the banished or exiled ancient king, mirroring the Hebrew concept of a transient, timeless god. Saturn's female consort and global cult of the mother. Okay, so we're gonna get into this. We also gonna get into the matriarchal thing as well. And if anybody's trying to understand the whole matriarchal thing or whatever, it's not going to be what y'all expect it to be. But you can get into Gerald Massey's stuff. Gerald Massey's Natural Genesis. He talks about the matriarchal concept. You see what I'm saying? And he talks about kind of how what that was. It's not going to look, if any females out there listening and kind of like interesting, it's not going to be as pretty and as y'all kind of think. Okay, so Saturn's female consort and the global cult of the mother. The query necessitates an investigation into historical instances where Saturn was identified as a female or associated with a dominant female epoch. While Saturn Kronos is consistently gendered male in Roman and Greek mythology, his necessary relationship with his consort provides the crucial link to the feminine principle. Now, I was trying to get the AI to find other instances where Saturn is depicted as a female, or shown as a female in mythology and everything like that. I know in astrology, in astrology, in certain records in astrology, they equate Saturn with the crone. They don't always equate Saturn with an old man. Sometimes Saturn is equated with the crone or the old woman in more older literature as far as astrology is concerned. I have ran into that. Saturn's wife was Ops, the Roman goddess of wealth, abundance, and resources, equivalent to the Greek Rhea. Furthermore, Saturn, Kronos, is strongly associated with the deep chthonic nature, chthonic serpent nature embodied by the Titans. The age over which Saturn presided, the spontaneous fertile golden age, was characterized by the absence of labor and the earth's natural bounty. We talked about that. We did a whole video on that. You see what I'm saying? The Saturnian golden age. This epoch, governed by plenty and innate fertility, aligns perfectly with the societal structure of a matriarchy and the global cult of the mother, Magna Mater, such as Sybil. Sybil was known as the great Idaean mother of the gods. Now, let's go back to what we were talking about. Now, we just explored the languages and stuff like that, and we see how it would not be a stretch to say, okay, well, if a person was from the outside looking in, did look at all these groups of people and say, okay, they're Ethiopians, and say, okay, well, that's a blanket term, meaning, you know, for the sake of this conversation, black or whatever case may be, that wouldn't be a stretch because all of these are the same people. You see what I'm saying? And we talked about that on a previous video. In Ophiolatria, the book written by Hargrave Jennings, a student of Pascal Beverly Randolph, he says that Ethiopian, meaning burnt faces, is a misnomer. Ethiopian does not mean burnt faces. Ethiopian is not an exonym, not something that somebody else called them. It's what they call themselves, and it's denoting their religion. Ath, Ophion. Ath meaning the female deity. Ophion is the male deity. Ophion ties into Ophidian and all that stuff like that or whatever. Ophion ties into the Pelagian deity, Ophion and stuff like that. So pretty much what we're saying, all the people who lived in the geographic regions that spoke these various different languages and everything like that, and they worshiped the mother and child cult, we're saying that these people were probably these same Ethiopians that we're talking about or whatever. And we're not trying to sound no kind of way, but I mean, people be lying these days, and we gotta kind of like, I have to say it like this, because if I don't, somebody gonna come and tell me, man, I don't know if these Egyptians is black. I don't know if these people are this, and they clearly speak the language. So, yeah, so we have to take this painstaking detail, because if we don't, somebody gonna lie. You know what I'm saying? And we can't have that. You see what I'm saying? So, therefore, the interpretation suggests that if you like what you've been hearing, like, subscribe. I know it's kind of a long one, kind of in-depth one, but you know, we're gonna get to the promised land. We're gonna land the plane. Okay, so therefore the interpretation suggests that while Saturn was not physically female, like I said, astrologically, in certain instances, you will find Saturn as a female. The epoch defined by Saturn's generous primordial role was sociologically and spiritually matriarchal. Let's see here. Okay, The epoch defined by Saturn's generous primordial role was sociologically and spiritually matriarchal. So when we go back into this Satya Yuga, when we go back into this Sabean phase that we've been talking about on numerous videos, this is your matriarchal period of time, or what have you. But as we can see, it's not all sugar and spice and everything nice. It's a lot going on. It's giants, it's dinosaurs and stuff like that. It's these nagas that we've been talking about. It's probably cannibalism. It's people being sacrificed. It's all kind of things going on or whatever. No doubt they developed higher spiritual technology and spiritual things during this time or whatever case may be. But it's not just all sugar and spice, as we've been seeing, as we've been kind of going through a lot of this stuff. So let's get into this. Part 3, the earthly origins, Massey, Marniche, and the overthrow of the motherhood. So we're going to contrast this, and we're going to go into the matriarchal system and the overturning of the matriarchal system. Because see, people talk about this stuff like, like this is something that happened a decade ago or something like this, the matriarchal, patriarchal thing or whatever the case may be. This is something that happened a long time ago and everything like that. Let me see here. Gerald Massey's Egyptian evolutionary topology. Gerald Massey's exhaustive work, including Ancient Egypt, Light of the World, and Natural Genesis, argue forcefully that Egyptian mythology provided the foundation for subsequent Jewish and Christian beliefs, right? And it's no coincidence that it did, because if it did, we just gonna give the benefit. If it did, these are all the same people. Hebrews ain't nothing but another iteration of Ethiopian. That's why you have Hebrews, Jews in Yemen, you have Jews in Ethiopia and everything like that, because these are the same people. So, back to what we saying, Massey maintained that civilization originated in Africa, Tadnetir, the land of the gods, right? And delineated the evolution of Egyptian topology through 4 primary chronological phases, like what we've been talking about this whole time. Sabean, stellar phase, right? The earliest, most primitive epoch characterized by star worship, placing the origins of civilization squarely in the south in Africa, right? Lunar phase, defined by dominance of the mother goddess, where and we equate the lunar phase more so with the Twa. You see what I'm saying? Defined by the dominance of the mother goddess, where spiritual or sociological lineage was traced through the maternal line, the matriarchy. This phase often revolved around the moon god Tot, and we got a whole video on that when we talk about the Twa, volume 2. Tahuti's alchemy versus Lord Shiva's Rasa Shastra. We talk all about that. Solar lunar phase, a period of transition and syncretism, exemplifying the Osirian drama, where Osiris, the nighttime sun, is resurrected as his son Horus. That's when the Osirian drama really takes hold, or whatever case may be. Make no mistake about it. Osiris is associated with the moon, but Osiris is also associated with El, or Saturn. You see what I'm saying? Saturn takes 28.5 years to make a rotation around the sun or whatever. Osiris's body is cut up into 28 pieces. We know that the moon, a month can be rounded to 28 days, however it may go. So there's various different symbolism. The moon and Saturn their symbolism kind of overlaps in certain areas. Solar phase, the ultimate phase, characterized by the dominance of the sun god Ra and the establishment of the formalized patriarchal system, the brotherhood. So when we get to this solar phase, Jesus Christ is a solar deity. You see what I'm saying? Even my name, Bako Tepasare, I have Re at the end of my name. It reflects this solar era of time. The ultimate phase, characterized by the dominance of the sun god Ra and the establishment of the formalized patriarchal system. This is when the patriarchal system is finally established, or whatever case may be. So when we talk about these 4 phases with this Gerald Massey and everything like that, it actually explains a lot, and we kind of get into a lot. So Massey's thesis asserts that the brotherhood overthrew the motherhood. The sociological transition from matriarchy, lunar phase, to patriarchy, solar phase, provides the human correlate for the cosmological catastrophe described by Talbott. The solar patriarchal shift demanded the purging of the earlier chaotic and feminine-centered systems, right? Because, okay, so go back to the video where we talk about we talk about transcendence and the antinomian current and all that, sexual polarity and everything like that. I might link it in the comments and everything like that. We talked about the right hand and the left hand path or whatever. We talked about during this phase, this is where they developed all their spiritual technology and everything of that nature. But we also talked about how when the left hand path is high risk, high reward. The right hand path is slow and steady, wins the race, or whatever case may be. The left hand path was potentially developed first, and it has more risk associated with it, and it's over time, as it was warped, a lot of your taboos in society come out of that. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And as it began to be warped, that became known as what we call evil in society and stuff like that. Even antinomianism comes out of that, or whatever case may be. The left-hand path is a ritualistic way of doing certain heterodox practices. However, the antinomianism is you just trying to destroy the law or reshape society so that the taboos will be accepted. That's a whole nother different thing we talked about on previous videos. Whenever you operate in contradiction, let's say like we use the example of taking a person and rendering him 3/5 of a person or whatever, that level of contradiction causes negative feedback from what we call in the feedback loop, aka karma. Can you dig it? So yeah, because in the back of your mind, if you look at a person and you say, okay, well, this person is 3/5 of a person, but in your mind, you can clearly see that this is a human being or whatever case may be. So just by virtue of the fact that you know that's a human being, that's an archetype in your mind also, and everything like that or whatever case may be. So you owe this person a certain level of reciprocity and certain level of dealings, because from a subliminal level or whatever, he's a mirror of yourself. You see what I'm saying? So the contradiction of you treating him in a different way or whatever case may be, it's going to cause a negative feedback. Same way if you call a girl a boy. Same way, same thing. You know what I'm saying? So that was my rant. That was my in-video rant. So, okay, so Massey's thesis asserts that the brotherhood overthrew the motherhood. The sociological transition from matriarchy, lunar phase, to patriarchy, solar phase, provides the human correlate for the cosmological catastrophe described by Talbott. We call that the younger dryas. The solar patriarchal shift demanded a purging and everything like that. Notably set the murderer of Osiris, a figure embodying the chaos of this transition, is later explicitly figured as the Hebrew Satan. Right? Because we're going to talk about that. How Satuk changes from a beloved deity, basically, you see what I'm saying, a very beloved deity, into basically the embodiment or the depiction of evil or what have you, suggesting that the cosmological breakdown and the violent end of the matriarchal golden age was mythologized as the genesis of evil. Okay. So Dana Marniche, Hebrews in Afro-Arabia and Cushite connections. Dana Marniche ethnohistorical research posits a radical recontextualization of Hebrew origins, locating them deeply within Afro-Arabia rather than the traditional Levant Neolithic setting. Now, what she's talking about, she's saying originally, prior to the death of Solomon, they were in the Wadi Canaan. They were in Southwest Arabia and everything like that. And sometime after that, they migrated to what Arabia portray, or what's commonly called the Middle East or Palestine, however it may go. Okay, so Marniche contends that tribes associated with the early Israelites and Midianites, such as the Banu Salim, identified with the Salome mentioned by Tacitus, having ancestral links to Cushitic-speaking tribes in the Horn of Africa in southern Arabia, right? So she's saying that the Israelites had ancestral links with the Cushitic-speaking tribes in the Horn of Africa, like how we just said. Cushitic is one of the 6 branches of the Afro-Asiatic language family and stuff like that. It's spoken in the Horn of Africa. Yeah. Okay, so in southern Arabia. So let's see here, Southern Arabia, Southwest Arabia, Omotic and Semitic languages. Omotic languages are spoken in Southwest Arabia, and Semitic languages are spoken in Arabia, period. Okay, so her work emphasizes that traditional Arab sources relocate biblical narratives such as that of Joseph, not in Egypt, but in Southwest Arabia, dealing with the Amalekites rather than the Egyptians. Furthermore, contemporary accounts describe some ancient Arabian tribes, particularly the Banu Salayim in the volcanic Hara region, as having a distinctive African phenotype, being characterized as black tribes and tropical Arabs with shining black skins. This suggests a fluid, extensive population flow between Africa and Arabia, often placing the ancestors of the Israelites within the geographic and cultural sphere characterized by Cushitic influence, right? So these are the same people. We just explored the language and everything like that, talking about that same thing. And this is kind of like why we kind of did that. Afro-Asiatic language group. That's kind of like, that's what they're talking about when they talk about Arabia. And as we talked about, that's anciently called Ethiopia and everything like that. Let me see here. And we talked about a migration taking place from Arabia into Africa. You see what I'm saying? Deep into the BC. We're theorizing probably about 8,000 BC, something like that. A lot of your tribes that exist in the Sahel today and everything like that, a lot of parts of Africa, Yoruba tribe and everything like that, originally come out of Arabia. You see what I'm saying? We said that on previous videos. Dana Marniche says it. Several other people say it. What's the guy's name? Khalil Salibi. He talks about it in his book, The Bible is from Arabia. So it's several people that say this. It's not a popular thought process for obvious reasons, for obvious political reasons or whatever. But like I said, this is not meant to offend anybody in any type of way or whatever. But you know, you can't fake a language. You see what I'm saying? So by placing early Hebrew ethnogenesis in the Cushitic-linked Afro-Arabian South, Marniche's thesis aligns geographically with Massey's concept of Sabean stellar African birthplace of civilization, right? This regional correspondence provides the specific cultural vector through which primordial non-solar worship systems, the Saturnian Sabean cults, could have influenced early Hebrew identity. What? Because they're the same people from the same places. The Hebrews are just a later iteration of that. Okay, explaining the persistence of the Saturnalian connection in later Hebrew mysticism. Okay, so Hargrave Jennings, Opheliotia, and the Ethiopian Ophidian link. The exploration of Hargrave Jennings' work on Opheliotra, serpent worship, reveals a deep mythological and potential linguistic tie to the Afro-Arabian setting. Jennings documented the pervasive and fundamental role of the serpent in ancient rituals worldwide, linking the Ophidian tradition to the transformation, duality, and the mysteries of life and death. And it's no coincidence. We talk about Ovid writes the book Metamorphosis. He's talking about how the gods could shapeshift and stuff like that. And it's no coincidence that when we talk about this golden age or whatever case may be, we're talking about the Naga. And that's it. And I'm pretty sure we can make the connection in that. The request specifically asks about the connection between the word Ethiopian and Ophidian. Historically, the term Ethiopian describes a vast, ancient, undifferentiated race. A vast, ancient, undifferentiated race stretching along the southern ocean from India to the pillars of Hercules. A vast, ancient, undifferentiated race. These people we've been talking about this whole time that speak the Afro-Asiatic language family. Oh, it's some global civilization and we just don't know what it is. I'm telling you what it is. Dana Marniche is telling you what it is. But it's not politically acceptable. But we're gonna straighten all that out, like I said on a previous video. So if as Dana Marniche suggests, The early Hebrews were linked to this broad Cushic Afro-Arabian group, and if the Ophidian cult was foundational to the primordial Sabean age, as Jennings and the esoteric tradition suggest, citing the draconian tradition of Egypt, then the earliest Hebrew traditions are inherently intertwined with Ophiliotria. Can you dig it? Because again, Hebrews are just another iteration of Ethiopian. So yeah, their traditions are going to be inherently intertwined with all this stuff. So they're going to have remnants of the mother cult, the mother and child cult, or whatever case may be, because these are the people that they come from. You see what I'm saying? The continuity of this link is observed in African traditions, such as Ethiopian and Sudanese Zar rituals, which still incorporate serpent forms and rods, like the magical serpent rod of Moses, into their practices. The persistent, or the brazen serpent, all that. This persistent presence suggests that the Ophidian current was a dominant spiritual factor in the geographical region, identified as the cradle of early Hebrew culture during the Sabean phase, right? Okay, so part 4. I know it's wordy and nerdy, but we trying to kind of nail down a couple of key points, and then we just gonna sit this here as in a playlist for future, for the benefit of posterity. Can you dig it? So, symbolic synthesis: serpents, giants, and Saturnalian echoes, the serpent in the Garden of Eden, and the matriarchal golden age mythology, right? So remember when we said that the Bible is just the cliff notes for ancient civilizations. Not that it's a bad thing, not that it's saying anything bad about the Bible or whatever case may be, but you cannot put biblical Judeo-Christian theology on everything and expect it to fit, because you're going to confuse yourself and confuse other people. So because it's the cliff notes. The engineering of your spiritual system, it's designed to be simplistic. It's not designed for you to have a lot to think about. So a lot of the more expanded information is in these other civilizations that all these other languages come from, because these are the same people. So when you start to put all this together, or whatever case may be, you get something closer to the full story. So the serpent in Eden and the matriarchal golden age mythology, the biblical account of the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Notice that the Bible ain't talking about Nagas. The closest thing to the Nagas you get in the Bible is Nachash, the whisperer in the Garden of Eden. The serpent, the most subtle beast of the field. That's the closest thing you get in the Bible to talking about the Nagas. However, when we go to Jain philosophy, or their stories, when we go to the Vedic stories, when we go to Upanishads, all this stuff like that or whatever, it's chock full of serpents or whatever case may be. You see what I'm saying? So the biblical account of the serpent in the Garden of Eden is viewed within the syncretic framework, not as a unique theological event, but as the Hebrew recasting of far older Mesopotamian myths, such as the Gilgamesh narrative, where a serpent tricks humanity out of immortality. The serpent, or Nachash, represents not the demonic Satan, a later dualistic concept, because these early traditions are not dualistic in nature. There's no concept of God and the devil. You see what I'm saying? They have multiple gods, and their gods are like people. You know what I'm saying? The most heroic, benevolent God might do something that may be not as heroic. You see what I'm saying? Like in the stories of, when you read Greek mythology, Zeus is doing good stuff. Zeus ties into the planet Jupiter. He's good fortune. He's benevolence and everything. But Zeus does some messed up stuff in the story sometimes. Okay, so but the spiritual dominance of the Nagas or Ophidians during the primordial golden age, the age of Massey's Matriarchy. Okay, and just to clear up some other stuff, because before so we can alleviate our juvenile conversations before we even have them. Okay, so some people, they have this whole thing. I know certain racial groups or whatever case may be, or racial supremacist groups have this ideology of, they use the serpent seed, the woman seed and the serpent seed to kind of justify some sort of brutality against people of African descent. But what we gonna get into when we talk about this, when you get so far back in history, you're primarily gonna run into people like this. These are the people that you're gonna run into. When we talked about the planet, go back into the video, I'm just being frank. I'm not trying to hurt nobody's feelings, but I'm just keeping it 100. When we go back to the video about giants in the earth in those days and everything like that, we understand what melanin is. We understand what melanin does. And when we talk about the planet in that particular phase of time, when the planet was more electrically charged with higher voltage and stuff like that, the planet probably could not produce people who did not have an abundance of melanin. You see what I'm saying? That was like I said, melanin is not a black thing, it's a human thing or whatever case may be. So the planet had to be weakened in its electrical charge in order to even produce certain groups of people on the planet. So that's what and I'm gonna just say it like that, and I'm gonna just leave it there. And that's not no disrespect to, you know what I'm saying, any of my Caucasian viewers. You know what I'm saying? Much love and respect to y'all. I got white friends, people I know who I got much respect for. So it's nothing like that or whatever. But those are for all my people who are kind of like on the supremacist side of things. Like I said with the Aryan thing, Aryan, that ain't what y'all talking about. That's Kabari, that's Egyptian, that's these people again. So that's what I'm saying. The people who doing the hating, y'all wasn't thought about when we talk about this. When we talk about the serpent seed and the woman seed, they're not talking about you. That's you're later. So we're not respectfully, and we're not gonna get into all that. But that y'all are a later thing. You see what I'm saying? Y'all are more closer to the modern time. The planet had to come down in voltage to even produce certain groups. You see what I'm saying? Even those who have an abundance of melanin, it's not even functioning properly because the planet has been so lowered in voltage. So the things that can produce, the things that are produced on the planet now that we have the moon and the lower voltage on the planet or whatever, this is the weaker version of everything. You see what I'm saying? So, you know what I'm saying? No disrespect, but when we get back into the ancient world and stuff like that, and we start talking about certain things or whatever case may be, certain things, you see what I'm saying? It's a certain, it shows up in a certain way. That's all I'm saying. You know, no disrespect, just keeping it a buck. But the biblical account of the serpent in the Garden of Eden is viewed with this syncretic framework, not as a unique theological event, but as a Hebrew recasting of far older Mesopotamian myths, such as the Gilgamesh epic, where a serpent tricks humanity out of immortality. The serpent, or Nachash, represents not the demonic Satan, a later dualistic concept, but the spiritual dominance of the Nagas, or Ophidians during the primordial golden age, the age of Massey's Matriarchy. The act of Eve eating the forbidden fruit, which is not identified as an apple. Now, when we get into Anton Park's stuff, you see what I'm saying? He has a different spin on some of this stuff as far as the trees in the garden and everything like that. And again, he has, shout out to Anton Parks, he has some interesting stuff or whatever out there. He talks about the two trees are two different cities, one teaching them healing stuff and one teaching them how to make weapons and everything like that. So he has a slightly different spin on it. So it's kind of interesting how his take on it. The act of Eve eating the forbidden fruit, which was not identified as an apple until medieval commentators correlated the Latin malum, apple, with malum, evil. Like how you unalive somebody, that's considered malum in se in the law, evil in itself, that type thing, is interpreted through the lens of goddess consciousness as an act of initiation. The serpent represents Shakti, the feminine transformative energy. Eve, listening to the serpent, her primal Shakti, and consuming the fruit is understood as a sovereign choice to receive forgotten feminine wisdom, as an act that necessarily terminated the state of unconscious paradise, right? Her embracing her kundalini in this, how this is explained, terminated her unconscious paradise. The initiation ended the matriarchal golden age and simultaneously triggered the ascendancy of the patriarchal system, the father god who cast them out, justifying the mythological cursing and subjugation of the serpent. Yeah, because the way Gerald Massey describes it, as you have the lineage going from mother to eldest daughter and everything like that, and you have the tree, and the mother is like the tree, and the various branches of the tree are the various sisters or what have you that give birth to the different people and stuff like that. And in this concept or whatever case may be, yeah. Okay. So okay, just fun fact. Since I'm ranting, let me come and get it, true and living. We gonna go and get it to you. So okay, so in this concept, when you get into Gerald Massey and he starts talking about the matriarchal society or whatever, this is the fatherless society. This is the energy that they're trying to usher into society right now, because they know that the feminine energy, women are coming into more prominence or whatever. So they put things out there to trick y'all out y'all position and stuff like that. So the whole thing about what baby mamas and stuff like that. Okay, so in the matriarchal society, how Gerald Massey is describing it, yeah, I told you it ain't gonna be all pretty like how people think it is, but we're gonna go and get it to you. So in the matriarchal system, like how Gerald Massey is talking about, it's more of a totemic thing. This is where you get, let's say, a woman reaches a certain age or whatever case may be, and she's of the age of fertility and stuff like that. It's a different concept or whatever case may be. All the men come and consummate with that particular woman, and nobody knows who got her pregnant. You see what I'm saying? And the child is raised within the group. You see what I'm saying? So it's a whole nother different concept. So yeah, the brotherhood overtakes the motherhood, because what happens is all of the people or what have you, they're descending matrilineally and everything like that. But what happens is you have men being born and stuff like that that are members of varying different groups and stuff like that, very different matriarchal matrilineal situations or whatever, and they combine together across varying different families or whatever to form the brotherhood, and eventually the brotherhood overthrows the motherhood. And that's why you have concepts like dowries and stuff like that, because when you take a woman out of the group or whatever, you're taking away the group's ability to survive and reproduce and everything like that, because the woman produces the children and everything like that. So it became more of a thing of defending the group's ability to reproduce and everything at a certain point or whatever. The world, it's not so much that men just wanted to subjugate women or whatever the case may be, but the world just got harsher in a sense. And the ability to reproduce became very valuable for the survival of the group. So women were something to be coveted, and I don't know, it just protected. You see what I'm saying? For that reason. So I know that may not have been what you probably was expecting when I went kind of going into that. As far as the matriarchal thing or whatever case may be, it ain't as pretty as painted as feminism probably paints it out to be or whatever case may be. But this is a time when you can document that there's a matriarchal system or whatever case may be. You know, like I said, you go into Natural Genesis and kind of get into that. Let's see. And this is the society, and this is the stuff. This is what Aleister Crowley was dealing with, or whatever case may be. The Typhonian thing, the matriarchal thing, the mother goddess and stuff like that. All that, a lot of that Thelema stuff. It's centered around this. You see what I'm saying? Stuff like this. The concept of the orgy, like when snakes come together in a ball or whatever, and they mating and stuff like that. All of that stuff comes out of this. You see what I'm saying? So when I say what I say about the matriarchal thing or whatever case may be, I'm not painting it to be good or bad. I'm just laying it out how it shows up. At least in Gerald Massey's work. There are other things that suggest that there may have been other little nuances, bells and whistles as it pertains to that or whatever. A lot of the spiritual technology that was developed around that time or whatever. So it's a good and bad thing. It's not this utopian society because, you know, women were in charge or whatever case may be. It wasn't this magical utopian society or whatever. It was a few more moving parts than that. So just to kind of like, I don't know, paint an even picture of it. Yeah. So the Philistine origin of giants, and now again, another in-video rant. So the Philistine origin of giants and interaction with giants. The biblical accounts of giants, Nephilim, Rephaim. Remember, we telling you that the giants come from the Kabari as far as the Egyptians. The Egyptians called them the Kabari. You see what I'm saying? That's where the word Aryan comes from. You see what I'm saying? Kabari, Ari. You see what I'm saying? The companions of the Big Dipper. Nothing to do with nothing y'all talking about. So who constantly opposed the Israelites, e.g. Goliath, the Philistine, are interpreted here as the physical remnants of the cosmic chaos following the collapse of the Saturnian order. The Nephilim are often linked to the chaotic intermingling of the sons of God and human women, representing an abnormal hybridization that defied the ordained natural boundaries. In the context of Talbott and Massey's theories, the catastrophic event making the end of the Saturn configuration would have plunged the world into instability and massive electromagnetic discharges, right? And that may be the reason why we have the tectonic plate shifting and all kind of periodic disasters on the planet, is because, it may be potentially because the planet is in an unnatural state. Though it appears to be natural to us or whatever case may be, the moon being where it is might actually be some sort of patch for what it is supposed to be. It may be some sort of stabilizing mechanism in a lot of the geological blowback that we get periodically. It may be because the planet is in an unnatural state. Potentially this position that the planet was in, that facilitated a higher charge or whatever, that was probably the original. That's probably how the planet was normally. This thing that we experiencing is probably something different. Gigantism and monstrous forms can be understood as physical manifestations of the shattered celestial framework, the scars of cosmic violence, the Philistines as inheritors and allies of these Rephaim, thus become the symbolic physical embodiment of the residual pre-patriarchal chaos that the emerging ordered Israelite system was mandated to destroy. So if you get into the lost books of King Og, you see what I'm saying, the Book of Giants and all that stuff like that, it kind of gets into what's being discussed right there. The giants were more on the old way of doing things, the pre-flood way of doing things. Okay, the defeat of Goliath, closer to this Ophidian matriarchal system type thing. Okay, because remember, when we're dealing with this particular era of time, there is no law. You see what I'm saying? There is no law. You see what I'm saying? Now, the frequency on the planet is higher where people just know to do the right thing. But as we've read before in as this time as described by a lot of mythological accounts, so-called, there's no law, in this time, for better or for worse. The defeat of Goliath by David is therefore a profound mythological victory of the new structured Yahwistic solar patriarchal order over the vestiges of the chaotic age of giants that followed the fall of the primordial Saturn. So synthesizing the Saturnian current in the Hebrew history, the synthesis, let's see here. Okay, let me just see here. Okay, the analysis demonstrates that the Hebrew connection to Saturn persists because their ethnogenesis, as suggested by Marniche, may be rooted in the Afro-Arabian Sabean cultural complex. Yeah, based on the language, we know that. Placing them near the geographical cradle of the primordial, stellar-focused worship system, right? Okay, so don't when we deal with sidereal astrology, ain't that stellar focus? Ain't that a remnant from a far gone era? Remember, then we say the people in the north, they left. You know what I'm saying? Egypt or whatever. No coincidence that they wound up with a lot of serpent motifs and everything like that. We said the people from the South India and stuff like that, that's Eastern Ethiopia. We said the people from the Northern India or whatever, the Aryans or whatever case may be, they left Egypt, according to Kenneth Grant in the book Cults of Shadows. You know, we got to have a bibliography and some receipts with this. Cults of Shadow and everything like that. He talks about the Ophidian current comes out of Egypt or whatever, and they migrated and became the Aryans. You know what I'm saying? They migrated where they was and became the Aryans. They lost this extended conflict between these two priesthoods. They eventually lost, and they reworked their stuff and wrote new books in new languages and stuff like that. We know that, right? How we know that? fluent living. How we know that? We know that because Sanskrit has elements of Akkadian in it. Sanskrit has elements of Egyptian in it. And if Sanskrit was original, how they say, because we know people be lying, Egyptian and Akkadian would have elements of Sanskrit in it. Then we say Akkadian. What? Akkadian. That's Eastern Semitic. Then we say that. Okay. Why would this language have Eastern Semitic in it from the Afro-Asiatic language family? So we're gonna keep going with that. No disrespect to nobody, but we gotta lay it down like that because people be lying. And I'm gonna put it to you like this. People be lying, and when we let certain things like this slide, man, we got to live in a world with these people and these crazy ideologies. So we got to go on, nip it in the bud real quick, man, so it don't go no further than it need to. So my young gods can already have something to work with for the next episode. You know what I'm saying? So people can't play with us in our face like this. Okay, so conclusion. The connection between historic Jews and Saturn is far more complex than a simple astrological correspondence. The planet Shabbatai functions as a multi-layered archetype representing primordial sovereignty, the ideal golden age, the profound trauma of cosmic and sociological transition. The data supports the contention that Saturn L. Cronus served as the universal monarch of antiquity, whose subsequent fall coincided with the end of a widespread matriarchal societal structure characterized by Sabean and Ophidian worship traditions, right? And I think we gave the necessary receipts with that. Like I said, if you interested in that matriarchal current, that's Natural Genesis got all that in it. You see what I'm saying? That book was written before I was born, before my mama was born. You feel me? So the work of Gerald Massey, and Gerald Massey's not a black guy. Gerald Massey's a white guy. You see what I'm saying? So, and if anybody want to know anything, I know I've been hearing echoes of people talking about there ain't no proof that the original Celts were black and everything like that, man. Let's go into the book Ancient and Modern Britons. Let's go into the book, what is it? I think Ancient Egypt, Light of the World. Gerald Massey, he talks about that. So it's thick volumes that go into that type of information or whatever. And I think Ancient and Modern Britons, that was written by a white gentleman. You see what I'm saying? And he's talking about his personal lineage, and he's talking about the people that existed in the British Isles and in Europe thousands of years ago. You see what I'm saying? So we're not finna entertain no juvenile conversations. We're gonna move forward because my young gods, we gotta move on to the next episode. Like Dr. Dre in the Chronic, you did. So Dana, let's see here. The work of Gerald Massey provides a topological roadmap for this change, showing the shift from the motherhood to the brotherhood as a fundamental religious and social revolution. Dana Marniche's thesis offers an ethnographic context, suggesting that the geographical origins of the early Hebrews in the Afro-Arabian South place them directly within the sphere of these primordial traditions. Right? Right? Okay, so that's why that's why everybody in the Bible is got El in their name and stuff like that, and Yahweh takes on a lot of the attributes of El and stuff like that. And if you go back into the polytheistic version of Yahwehism or whatever case may be, he has a consort, Asherah, and everything like that. Asherah is the consort of El because they have a common metaphysics and common understanding of a lot of this stuff because they're basically the same people. Right? So Dana Marniche's thesis offers an ethnographic context, suggesting that the geographical origins of the early Hebrews in the Afro-Arabian South place them directly in the sphere of these primordial traditions, explaining the persistent Saturnalian and Ophidian linkage. Right? Ultimately, the duality inherent in Saturn, the Greater Malefic, who is simultaneously the Lord of the sacred day, reflects Judaism's successful strategy to integrate and sanctify the deep, potent memory of the fallen cosmic king while rigorously rejecting the chaotic vestiges, Moloch, giants, of his primordial pre-monotheistic domain. The Jewish relationship with Saturn thus stands as a sophisticated cosmologically encoding of human spiritual evolution from the primal mythical golden age to the established structured order of history. So yeah, so a lot of the stuff from Judaism, a lot of the symbolism and I don't know, elements of Judaism reflect a lot of these more ancient currents. You see what I'm saying? So, and again, this is not to disrespect nobody's religion or anything like that, or nobody's, you know, culture or whatever case may be. Like I said, I'm not a Hebrew. Much respect to those brothers. They've contributed, you know what I'm saying, to the community like anybody else. So I have no, you know, it's nothing against none of them. This is just a conversation for, I don't know, mature audiences or whatever. This is a mature conversation or whatever case may be. We're not trying to step on nobody's toes. I ain't trying to convert you to or away from nothing. It ain't my business. I'm really not concerned with that. So this is just for my younger viewers, my young guys who trying to study a little bit of this information and try to understand where some of this actually comes from. So that was what we had as far as that, as far as the star Shabbatai. We're gonna get more into some of this. We're gonna have a couple of other videos that talk about this same influence that exists in other monotheistic traditions and everything like that, right? So peace and blessings, man. There's no sign of this slowing down or stopping, so we're gonna keep pumping them out. If you like what you've been hearing, like and subscribe. Peace and blessings, man. Peace to the gods.